Welcome back to the channel, ladies and gentlemen. I hope you've had a wonderful Christmas so far. And of course, Merry Christmas to all of you, your family, and your friends. Who knows, maybe Santa's left a green arrow under the Christmas tree for you tomorrow. Today, I have for you solving your problems. We'll be looking at captaincy, albeit you're probably wondering why. I will explain. Well, we'll be looking at Arsenal assets in a little bit more depth because I did not cover them in everything you need to know. Wildcard 18 and benchings and one other thing as well. They say the gift is to give, not receive. So maybe you could give me a Christmas present in the form of a subscription, specifically if you are one of the regular viewers, the 37.3% of you who watch regularly, but without anything else needing to be said. Let's get into it. Firstly, I have some final thoughts on the Saka replacement section, which was located in everything you need to know. I will be specifically looking at the assets I touched on then and my final thoughts on them, and then I'll have an Arsenal section slightly later on in the video. Remember that it is the festive period. Rotation is still a thing, and it is always going to be a thing in this period, given the intensity of the football nowadays, and also just the scheduling and how many games there are, right? So when you're taking these expected minutes risks, you're taking huge risks because there are so many other options which people are going to go with, options without very solid fundamentals, such as Bruno, not Guimaraes, Bruno Fernandes in this case, Anthony Gordon, Brian Mbeumo, who people will go with as their Saka replacement, and they'll get minutes, and there's every chance they can return, right? Because they'll be on the pitch, they'll be in good positions, they'll have set pieces, they have the quality to score from a variety of positions and angles and ways, right? So you have to take that into account when you're going for someone like Luis Diaz, because he's got the competition at 9 and at the left wing. Same with Diogo Jota. Same with even Gabriel Jesus to some extent, who we touch on later. And I just wanted to ensure that people were really aware of that, because one thing I noticed myself is I wasn't thinking too much about expected minutes at the moment, because in the last few weeks we haven't had as much rotation given the scheduling has been slightly different. But for the next 3 weeks, given we've got block after block after block, I think that's something you need to take into account. And playing someone like Morgan Rogers is absolutely fine for that reason, right? Let's say you're not sure where you want to go on Saka. I don't mind just paying Rogers over him for a week, taking the price drop, and then at least you can assess where all the replacements are at, right? Maybe you see how Phil Foden does against Everton, City pick up some form, and instead of trying to time the bottom, you catch the trend upwards, and then you go from there. And it is Leicester away after that, right? So that's another potential solution to this problem. And the last thing I wanted to touch on was Martin Odegaard's role, and just following some discussion in a group chat, someone did express an intelligent opinion, I thought, that now without Saka and without his levels of creativity and overall attacking skill set, well, we've got to take that and we've got to put it across the team, whether it be in the form of the players and giving other people responsibility, platforming them in a different way, or using a different system entirely. And maybe Martin Odegaard falls into that category because he is the only other player who really plays in an attacking role on the right-hand side, and he is the most creative player outside of Saka as well, right? So with that in mind, maybe he does play a little bit further up. Maybe there's less second phase work, and maybe we'll see an Odegaard evolve. That is something that recently I've just been considering because I hadn't heard of that idea before, and I think it's a very solid one, right? So those were just some final thoughts I had on the Saka replacements. But now let's move on to cap. You may be wondering why I've even got this section in the first place. Well, even though there is only one candidate for this week, in my opinion, and that is Mohamed Salah, there is one thing we absolutely must touch on for some of the people looking to be ultra aggressive. From a theoretical standpoint, in terms of rewards, not risk reward, but just reward, this is probably the best opportunity you're going to get this season, or at least the best opportunity you're going to get with the triple captain taken out of things, because everyone and the dogs are going to go with Mohamed Salah captaincy, right? Pretty much anyone who's playing the game seriously and looking to maximize points, which means that there's a lot of upside to be had if Salah does blank and you go elsewhere and you hit. The issue I have with it, and why even when I was trying to find out could I ever go against Mohamed Salah this week, is that the floor is so high. So even if you hit, Salah's floor is so high this game week that you could hit, and you could hit really well, and you could haul. But all he has to do is get one return with some bonus, and given the volume of opportunities and the type of opportunities he's likely to get, and you only gain like 5, 6, 7 points, and you deserve a lot more when you haul and you're taking on this type of risk. And that's my issue with it. The upside decreases significantly, resultant of the floor, and that's actually the main reason why I don't think you can justify in any capacity going against, unless you know that you have no regards for the risk that you're taking. You don't really care about it, and you just want to try and maximize reward and make some ground. And it's a decent way to do it, right? Of all the ways to do it, it's not a bad way when you take risk out of it. The other thing is, and I thought I'd just talk about this, if Hermansen and Vardy are both injured, Hermansen especially, then it could get pretty ugly for them. Obviously, Wolves put 3 past them. They've had a few poor performances. You saw in the second half what happened against Newcastle when Hermansen wasn't there, and Liverpool are in fine form, and people are knocking on the door for places in that front line. So I'm sure they'll all be ready to go. And you never know what that score could end up being. But yeah, that's what I just wanted to talk about, the people who are looking to take it on, why I think it's very hard to justify in terms of risk reward. But if you only focus on, there is, I guess, the possibility to go there. Who would I go? Well, that's the thing, right? When I looked, there was not a single other option that I thought, okay, yeah, there's even some potential here. However, if you have Erling Haaland, maybe even if you have Phil Foden, I wouldn't mind going there if I had to choose. Given this topic had very little discussion on it, if at all, in everything you need to know, I thought it was important to bring it up and spend some time on it here. I'll be looking at Gabriel Jesus, Gabriel Martinelli, and double Arsenal defense as a unit. Now, I personally do not see Kai Havertz getting benched or dropped anytime soon, right? I think it's very, very unlikely. Okay, maybe he has one game on the bench, but aside from that, nothing past that. And even that I think is somewhat unlikely. If he is to play in the side with Jesus, he is realistically going to only play at left central midfield. And that means there's no Declan Rice there, though there is no Mikel Merino there. Arteta has played both of them there, and he's clearly got somewhat of a liking for them in those positions, especially Merino. Otherwise, why would he have bought him in the first place, right? That means that for Jesus to play, that condition has to stay constant. He's got to be happy with Havertz playing left centre mid, game in, game out. He doesn't want him at 9. He's fine not having Merino or Rice there. And I think you're asking a lot of Arteta not to change that, like pretty much ever. Jesus would have to be in such good form for him to justify that consistently, in my opinion at least, because I think personally, when I watch Arsenal, I still prefer Havertz to 9 when they change the rest of the dynamics to suit him a little bit more. And we saw in the second half of last season how well it went for them, right? Jesus in isolation, I think there's a lot of upside there. Look at the performances against Palace and 5 goals in 1 week. And they were very sharp performances, finishing aside. And he was very much like a fox in the box, really aware of where to be and when to be there, but also those sharp, snappy actions, which he's definitely got. Very useful in his ability to leverage that to scoring goals and getting returns. Okay, and the fixtures I think are there as well. Ipswich at home is a very nice fixture, but even after that, against like Brentford away and Brentford away and the Brighton away, I think both games will be ones where Arsenal certainly pick up chances, albeit in a slightly different manner to the way they did against Palace. And him being the Arsenal number 9, if you're the number 9 for what started off as the second best team in the league, that's great, right? It's one of the reasons why I picked Havertz earlier on. And if you are the number 9 for the second best team in the league, and your minutes are somewhat secure with good fixtures, and you've got this type of quality and you're quite cheap, then it's a very attractive prospect, right? So that is something for all of you to consider with regards to Gabriel Jesus. One thing that I was a little, not really annoyed, but I felt like I should have considered Jesus before I made the Foden and Guardiola moves, because I had to make it so early. I didn't really give it any consideration. But had I done so, I wouldn't be surprised if I was sitting here with Gabriel Jesus instead of João Pedro and then Dunk instead of Guardiola, simply to attack the short-term upside, because I definitely do think it is there. However, you obviously have to account for the fact that he hasn't played too much football recently. So there's that minutes risk there, which FPL Discomfort alerted me to on X. So you should definitely go and follow him. And in general, he's also not been the most prolific striker. Streaky, for sure, but he misses quite a few chances. You even saw that when he was on his hat-trick against Palace. He should be walking away with another match ball, but he misses 2 big chances. And he's definitely got that in the locker, which can be a little bit frustrating and also bad for the bonus system. Moving on to Gabriel Martinelli. Well, what do Arsenal look like without Saka? And how do they replace him? You cannot replace him like for like or individually, right? Because he is your best attacking player. And if you had another one of him, then you'd probably be cruising at the top of the league. But they don't have that. So I think the responsibilities that he carried has to be just shifted across the side, because not just one person can do it. And you could potentially see a system change to accommodate for that, but likely both. Okay, I spoke about the difference in role that Odegaard can play and why that could be the case early in the video. But what about Martinelli? He's been somewhat restricted. Actually, no, not somewhat, but he's been quite restricted by Arteta in terms of output, given the lack of supply he's got on that left-hand side, and also his role in terms of holding width, similar in some ways to Jack Grealish. Could this injury see a slight shift for Arsenal? Could they have a more balanced dynamic as opposed to it being right-side heavy in terms of creativity and just general attacking output? Yeah, potentially. I could see that potentially being the case. Maybe even Martinelli might play on the right, like he did against Palace for a while with Trossard on the left. Obviously, Sterling's injured as well, so that doesn't help. You can't really drop Jesus after a brace, I don't think, and a hat trick as well. So I wouldn't be surprised to see him do quite well early on, because I do think that this Arsenal setup will slightly change and he'll be a little bit freer. However, I do worry about the ceiling when it comes to this type of player. One, because he hasn't been in the best of form. I don't think that's entirely his fault for a while now. And two, I'm assuming that Arteta changes things, but if he doesn't, then Martinelli's output is definitely in trouble, and the opportunity cost is large because there are so many good options at that price point. The fixtures are good for him. The fixtures are good for all of the Arsenal attacking assets. Now, moving on to double Arsenal defense, I like Raya more than I like Saliba and Timber, and that's really been the opposite for the rest of the season. So why? Well, I think the fixtures coming up after Ipswich at home aren't that easy. Brentford away, Brighton away, firepower, good attacks. So they'll probably get shots off and decent shots off, which means Raya will have to make saves, and that increases his ceiling a lot. And when it increases his ceiling, it will decrease Saliba and Timbers at the same time. And also, what's the likelihood of them getting attacking returns in those games? Well, specifically, Saliba's is heavily down when Gabriel is in the side, because he becomes the focus for the set pieces. And then Timber, I think, because he'll have to probably assume slightly more defensive responsibility in those tougher games, he's not as likely to get an attacking return. So I would probably have Raya's ceiling a little bit higher, or the likely ceiling a little bit higher. And also Timber acts as a blocker to Guardiola, who's someone I really like at the moment. So for me, if you're going to go double Arsenal defense, I would actually do Raya, Gabriel. I still prefer the 4.5s, but if you are adamant on having Raya, already have him. But if you have like Gabriel Saliba, Gabriel Timber, I would actually be looking at taking one of the two out after Ipswich. Many of you have requested this, and I think it might become a staple piece of solving your problems, because as we shift to structures, and have shifted to structures with 8th attackers, and also structures which have 6th, 7th, and 8th attackers, which are all cheap, this is just going to become a reoccurrence in terms of problem to solve. And you'll have those not just in the defense, but for those of you who have Fabianski, and you'll also have in the defense. I meant the midfield previously. So let's start. We'll start with Fabianski versus the goalkeeper you may have, right? I think if you have Raya, you play him. I think if you have Alisson, you play him. But other than that, I'd probably just start Fabianski away to Southampton. West Ham have looked decent defensively. They conceded quite a few chances against Brighton in the second half, and they definitely should have conceded again if it wasn't for some poor finishing and / a lack of final pass, or accuracy in the final pass. But I don't think Southampton pose anyone near as much of a threat as Brighton do. And West Ham, I think, have been decent defensively recently. They also have quite strong unit and good players as well. So I think that helps. Moving on to the midfielders, Ahmad, Enzo, Rodgers, and Semenyo. I guess what I should do is try to rank them in some sense, and then you can basically just, like, whichever ones you have, you can take it from there. For me, I would have Enzo at the bottom again. And the reason is similar to last week. You're you're increasing your risk profile significantly because you likely already have Cole Palmer and maybe Nicholas Jackson as well. Fulham are a very good defensive outfit. They show that many a time this year. They boast a very impressive level of physicality, which is difficult to play against for anyone, and they've showed that repeatedly. Then, as I mentioned, you likely already have Cole Palmer and maybe Nicholas Jackson as well. So you're limiting the amount of bonus you can get. Imagine all those three players were from different teams. You can now hit 3-3-3 for the bonus, but now you can only hit 3-2 and 1, right? You're losing a lot of points there. That's 3. It doesn't sound like a lot, but it's what? I guess it's essentially 50% gain going from 6 to 9, right? Which is a lot. Like, it doesn't sound like a lot because it's only 3 points, but it is, especially when you do that week on week on week on week. Okay, fine. Obviously, your players aren't going to score 3-3-3 on the bonus point system every single week. From a theoretical standpoint, like that 3 difference each and every week is what? 114 points. Lot across the season every game week. That is a lot to give up consistently. And it's why that I said that when you're going for attacking double ups, and triple ups especially, you have to have so much conviction that the side's going to score a lot of goals, and that all of these guys specifically are going to be involved. If you had a dynamic where it was like Kane, Son, and +1, or like Firmino, Mane, Salah, that's a better example, fair enough, I can kind of get it. But here, you also have the wingers, there's some set piece threat as well, and Enzo's got a different role to like some of the attack midfielders that you usually pick. He's nowhere near as attacking. He was playing in the pivot, and we were building in a 3-2 as opposed to a 3-1 last time, right? It's not what you want from your midfielder. So for me, he's definitely last out of these 4. Rodgers probably has the hardest fixture away to Newcastle, who are in good form and seem to have found a good solution in terms of problems that they had previously. I think he was absolutely brilliant against Manchester City. I imagine he carries some of that confidence, form, and momentum into this game. And against Newcastle, there'll always be the opportunity to transition, shown how dangerous he is in that, and just generally like putting the ball into him carrying and generating chances to return from that is an avenue to points, which I think will always be present against pretty much all opposition, given the quality he holds. So we're going to definitely put him in 1 or 2. For me, I'd have Ahmad in 3rd, and that is because 1, I don't trust United. 2, I don't trust United. And 3, it's not that I don't trust Amarin in terms of the footballing side of things, but he might play him at wing back. He might put him on the bench. It's unlikely to do that, but he might put him on the bench. He might sub him early, right? Like, he's got early substitutions in his locker, and he's got flexibility in terms of positions in his locker. And I think away towards new manager bounce, first game with a new manager, under the lights, coming off a 3-0 win, United coming off a 3-0 loss, I think there are far better spots which to exploit. So I'd have him 3rd, Enzo 4th, him 3rd. Semenyo again versus Palace is a difficult one. Between him and Rodgers, I think it's much harder than it is with all of the rest, because I don't think the system that Palace use really suits Semenyo's prospects. But coming off a goal and the fact it's at home, I'm going to say to put him at 1, Rodgers at 2, somewhat reluctantly. You can switch that around if you want. Ahmad at 3 and Enzo 4. I did promise I would share what I deem to be the optimal wildcard draft, so I have 2 of them for you. Firstly, we're going to look at a Haaland draft. And I will start by saying that both of these drafts, I don't hate them, I don't love them. I'm just not in the middle. I like them, but not that much. Mainly because they're so similar to the current established template and my team that I don't really feel like you're getting maximum utility out of a wildcard in comparison to what you maybe should. For 12 with a fixture swing, or even 6 if you saw that as a good opportunity. Subjective, but nonetheless, you can see the perspective. And yeah, this one just feels like you're shifting more and more into the template, and there's not too much exciting stuff about it. But I guess Haaland is in his own right. The issue with this is, for me, you have Rodgers, João Pedro, Ahmad, and Sarr. Sarr's not really that big of an issue because I'm actually quite happy playing him every week, given what he's showing and the fixtures. But to have to play 2 of Rodgers, Ahmad, and João Pedro, even though I guess in their own right, they've all done really well this season, doesn't fill me with confidence. The other thing, the exit routes aren't great. They always require 2 free transfers, and realistically, you're going to have to sell one of your brilliant assets in Palmer, Salah, Haaland, and Isak. And in that case, what was the point of selecting it? Especially if you're going to jump off quickly. So that's that. The reason I've kept Salah, Palmer, and Isak is I feel like you can basically keep them for a long time. Isak until 24 and then move out. But there's so much upside attached to them in those 3 weeks. It'd be such a big risk to go against the template when there's no other options that are looking like they can even compete with this ceiling on a regular basis. I don't think it's worth it. But like I said, this is a Haaland draft. I'm not going to justify why he's in this draft because, like I said, it's specifically for the people that want him. Like I said, Ismail Sarr can play every week because I think such a great option. And yeah, sure, he's 5.7, but if he was 7 million, we'd all be perceiving it very, very different, myself included. Rodgers and João Pedro, I don't need to speak about. I spoke about them pretty much every week, considering I own them. And then Ahmed, I waxed lyrical about him in the Everything You Need to Know video a couple of weeks ago. The fixtures after the next 3 are there. So you could bench him, like, for example, against Liverpool, but then after that, cash in on what hopefully is some good form. Robinson, Munoz, and Hall rotate interestingly. The fixtures aren't great. They're good, but they all provide you with attacking upside. I would say high floor and relatively high ceilings as well. And considering I was comfortable selecting that for my own team before I decided to go to Guardiola, I think it's fine for me to suggest it as well. Henderson's the cheapest keeper you can pretty much get outside of, Sanchez maybe or Sells, and the fixture run lasts for a while. There's definitely the ceiling there as well, but also the somewhat likelihood of Palace keeping clean sheets. So yeah, I think it's a solid draft. I just don't love it, mainly because it's quite template, and I've got 3 cheap midfielders, and João Pedro on board. I prefer this draft by quite a bit. Okay, fine. Henderson, Gabriel, Robinson, and Munoz is the same, but here my 5th defender is Anderson, and only for 0.3 more. And it's very useful because in Game Week 20, when Munoz has Chelsea, and if you wanted to take a play against Arsenal when they go away to Brighton, where I think personally they're going to concede, you can play double Fulham defense at home to Ipswich. Robinson will have the open play assist threat. Anderson will have the open play, the set piece threat, and Guardiola will have West Ham at home. Moving on to the rest of the defense, specifically Guardiola, I think there's so much upside associated to him in the next 5 weeks. I really like owning him as a differential. That's great. Foden, I've obviously spoken about a lot this week, and you know why I like him. Same with Sarr. And then you get to retain Isak while still having a very strong forward line in the form of Jackson, who I think everyone's slightly becoming a bit more bearish on, given we're seeing back-to-back games where the finishing hasn't really been there, maybe a slight loss of confidence, maybe some potential rotation. But the exit routes out of him are wonderful, regardless, given his price and how the forwards are structured in terms of pricing. And then you also get the upside of Gabriel Jesus, meaning you can bench Rodgers. And look, again, if you need to move out of there, it's not particularly difficult. Wood, Wissa, maybe even Mateta exist. Got triple. Wood, Wissa, in particular exist. And you can always bench Gabriel Jesus and just kind of play him for his better games anyway. When you think he's going to start. So I much prefer this draft. I think this is quite solid. Not so different from my team, but I would say this is probably better than my team. Bonus Southampton away, but after that, it'd be very similar. Just Jesus instead of João Pedro. Slightly better defense. So yeah, that's what I would say. That is all she wrote for Game Week 18's content, ladies and gentlemen. I hope you had a wonderful Christmas. Enjoy the rest of your day. Enjoy the festive period. If you have not dropped a like, I would appreciate it if you enjoyed the video. Likewise, if you have not subscribed, maybe we can make a late push to 6,000 subscribers as a late Christmas present for myself. Now, the best of luck for you this game week. I will see you on Boxing Day for transfer plans given and very tight turnaround again. And nothing else really needs to be said apart from enjoy the festive period. And I shall see you very soon. Good luck and goodbye.